An Affliction of the Heart, Volume 3, Hybrid, by Anonymous Pegasus. Chapter 9, Whipped. Swarm glumly lifted another mouthful of cereal into her mouth, pursing her lips and rubbing at her ear with a free hoof.
"What's the matter with you?"
Kuno asked, perking an ear at her daughter. Swarm mumbled something incoherently around her mouthful. "Don't talk with your mouth full," Warden said, pursing his lips and flicking her ear with a hoof as he passed on his way towards the kettle, which was whistling happily on the stove. Swarm gave an indignant huff, staring at her mother.
"Daddy hit me!"
"I saw,"
Kuno said airily, waving a hoof.
"You shouldn't have been talking with your mouth full. Now, why are you being so gloomy?"
"I don't want to go to school,"
Swarm admitted, frowning down at her cereal.
"They make me do things I don't want to do."
"I'm afraid you're going to have to get used to it,"
Kuno said with a thin smile.
"I bet you didn't even go to school,"
Swarm said flatly. Kuno blinked once, her brow furrowing.
"How do you figure?"
"Because you're a changeling,"
Swarm said coolly.
"That I am?"
Kuno said fearlessly.
"But how do you know I didn't go to school?"
"Because changelings are different."
Swarm said, picking at her bowl with a spoon.
"Mommy, why don't I have a queen?"
Kuno stiffened slightly at that, her eyes narrowing slowly. Warden paused at that as well, peering back over his shoulder with interest.
"You're not part of a hive. You're more pony than changeling,"
Kuno explained, pursing her lips.
"I can hear them sometimes.
Swarm said with an almost eerie note in her voice.
It's like whispering, but it's always really hard to understand."
Kuno pursed her lips and then nodded gently.
"Yes, that's the hive. You learn to block it out."
"What if I don't want to block it out?"
Swarm asked challengingly, staring up at her mother.
"Swarm, I am your mother, and I am the closest thing you will ever have to a queen. I know what is best for you, and you will obey me. Understood?"
Kuno asked, her eyes narrowing slowly. Swarm huffed faintly, her ears playing back.
"Fine."
"Look, Swarm, the hive is not something you want to be part of. It controls you. It makes you do things you don't want to do. It imposes the will of the queen on your consciousness. And I know you're too young to understand, but it's not, well, it's not something you want."
Kuno tried to explain, frowning deeply. Swarm nodded once.
"I understand."
Kuno pursed her lips.
"You really don't. Imagine being asleep or sleepwalking. You don't really know anything about what you're doing or what's going on, but you're still doing things."
Swarm wrinkled her nose.
"It sounds like school."
"It's a lot worse than school."
Kuno said with a single curt nod. Swarm shrugged her shoulders, little wings giving a flutter.
"Can I get my horn removed?"
Kuno recoiled slightly at that.
"Why would you even want such a thing?"
"Because I'm different.
Swarm said, chewing on her tongue slightly.
Everyone looks at me differently at school. They sort of stare. I don't like it."
Kuno pursed her lips again.
"Well, you're just going to have to learn to deal with it."
"Do I have to go to school?"
Swarm asked, giving a faint whine.
"I don't want them to stare."
Kuno gave a long sigh, shaking her head slowly.
"Not good enough."
Swarm's bottom lip quivered and her eyes began to well up with tears. "Stay strong, hun," Warren said conversationally, pouring a measure of hot water into a cup. Kuno pursed her lips, biting her tongue, the length of blue flesh clenched between her teeth as she bounced slightly on her hooves.
But...
Swarm gave a faint whine, bottom lip quivering further, her eyes growing large and naive.
But, Mommy, I don't want to go."
Kuno gave a huff, flailing a forehoof.
"Fine, but it's just for today."
Swarm broke into a bright smile instantly.
"Yay! So, what are we doing?"
Taking a trip to your father's parents?
Kuno said immediately. Warden stiffened, his ears splaying back. We are? Kuno raised a brow.
Do you have anything better to do?
Breathing? Was planning on scratching myself a bit later on. Warden said it with a firm nod. So, I'm a bit busy to go to Cloudsdale. Kuno pursed her lips at that, her eyes narrowing at her husband.
We both know I'm going to convince you.
She said bluntly.
So shut up and accept it before I impose no touching rules for an arbitrary length of time.
You really underestimate the depths of my hate for my father, Warden said bluntly. Swarm stared back and forth between them like a spectator at an air show.
More than you like touching?
Kuno said coyly. Warden bit his tongue and then looked back and forth between Swarm and Kuno. Will the puppy dog eyes work?
No.
Kuno said flatly.
And if you don't go, I will go. As you. And I reconcile so perfectly they will come to dinner tonight.
Warden splayed his ears back, giving a long sigh, his wings drooping. Well, fine.
Good boy. Now show me that you're whipped.
Kuno said, holding out her hoof. Warden sighed heavily and then leaned down to kiss her hoof gently. There. Happy?
Immensely.
Kuno said with a smile. Will I at least get something for enduring this torturous day? Warden asked plaintively.
I'll give you a good night kiss.
Kuno offered with a grin. Deal! Warden said, leaning to peck her on the nose. Kuno in her Pegasus form, Warden and Swarm, all sat in a train compartment, watching out the window as the floating city of Cloudsdale loomed larger and larger on the horizon.
How does it all stay up in the air?
Swarm asked, staring.
Does it have wings?
Kuno giggled at the thought.
No, hun. It floats on clouds.
Like Pegasus float on clouds?
Swarm asked. Kuno nodded.
Exactly like that.
Will I be able to float on clouds?
Swarm asked excitedly. Warden gave a worried frown. That's a very good question, actually. Kuno gave a soft hum.
Well, I can float on clouds. And she's half me and half you, so she should be able to, right?
I can't even fly yet.
Swarm whined, lifting a hoof to tug her wing until it was outstretched.
How can I float on clouds? They're all fluffy and soft like cotton candy.
A soft whine left Kuno.
No, I want cotton candy.
And I want not to be the only adult in this family, Warden said dryly. Kuno's eyes narrowed, and she cuffed him with an outstretched wing.
Liar. You're just as much a child as I am.
Warden rubbed the back of his head, chagrined. At least I can hide it. Kuno raised her wing threateningly. Warden huffed, holding up his good hoof to fend her off. Fine, fine. We're all children.
How are we getting to Cloudsdale?
Swarm asked after a few moments.
It's so high up, and I can't fly.
Warden nodded once. I can't fly either. He pointed out.
We're taking the sky staircase.
What's that?
Swarm asked. It's a staircase into the sky? Warden offered with a faint shrug. I've never used it before.
Why would they even make a staircase into the sky?
Swarm asked blankly.
It's stupid.
Because not every pony can fly, Warden said with a shrug. There are floating platforms up there that can support an earth pony or a unicorn, but with no way to get up there, they're pointless. Swarm shrugged.
Still, silly. Every pony that lives in Cloudsdale can fly. They're all Pegasuses.
Kuno raised her brow slowly.
No, they're not. There's a unicorn healer and an earth pony who likes to grow really high altitude flowers. That I know of off the top of my head.
But why would they live where Pegasus are supposed to live?
Swarm asked blankly.
That's silly.
Well, your father lives in a cottage, doesn't he? Even wondered why he doesn't live in the clouds?
Kuno asked. Swarm wrinkled her nose, looking back and forth helplessly.
Because Daddy grows things. And things don't grow in clouds. They grow in dirt.
So, why wouldn't a unicorn be able to do something in the clouds,
Kuno asked simply. Swarm huffed faintly, rubbing at an ear with a huff.
I guess you're right. But wouldn't it be all scary if you could just step wrong and fall?
Very scary, Kuno said with a single nod. That's why not many ponies do it.
Pegasus have it easy,
Swarm said with a smug smile.
because they can fly, and I'm going to be able to fly too, and sit on a cloud and watch everyone else who can't fly.
Kuno gave a faint giggle. That's one of the joys of being a winged creature.
I'm not a creature, I'm a pony.
Swarm said with a huff. We're all creatures, Kuno said with a shrug. Just some of us can talk. Swarm wrinkled her nose.
I'm not interested in what's that word, Mommy?
Semantics? Warren offered.
Those semi-thingies.
Swarm said with a huff.
No semi-thingies.
The carriage jolted as the train started to slow down, and the brakes squealed from the strain of slowing the inertia. Another jolt happened as the train came to a halt, causing all three ponies to sway in tandem.
Can we get drinks?
Swarm asked, jumping to her hoofs.
I want drinks.
Yes, we can get drinks, Kuno said with a shake of her head. Kuno? Warren asked, pausing at the doorway. Yes? Warren leaned closer, his ears playing back. I don't want to sound mean or anything, but can you forgo the collar? Just this once. Kuno's hooves flew to her neck, and she frowned deeply. But, it's my collar. My parents might get the wrong idea, Warren said with a slight wince. Well, I'll correct them. It's a fashion statement about the commercialism and the personalization of a pony and how we're all trapped by the existential nature of capitalism, Kuno said smugly. Warren frowned for a long moment and then gave a helpless shrug. That's just confusing enough that no one will bother asking you about it. That's the point, Kuno said with a wink and a grin, kissing his nose slightly. Now, to the staircase. You have many, many thousands of steps to climb while I fly alongside you, teasing all the way. But you gotta walk ahead of me so I can stare at your butt and have a target to reach. Warren whined. Well, tough, Kuno said with a giggle. I don't feel like a workout. Warren gave a long, suffering sigh. Well, I want to catch a glider down at least. You'll have to take Swarm with you, Kuno cautioned. No way am I letting her on one of those contraptions alone. Very well, Warren said with a wrinkled nose. But if you scream, Swarm, then no ice cream after dinner.
Not even a little screaming?
Swarm asked, staring with the sad eyes. Warren bit his bottom lip and gave a long sigh. It's terrifying how like your mother you are. Swarm giggled and poked out her tongue, prancing away. The stairway to Cloudsdale was really more of a highway than a staircase. A staircase at least 10 ponies wide had been erected, made of a kind of glowing magical material that shimmered and shifted in color from clear to every color of the rainbow. Along either side of the staircase were conveyor belts, carrying large minecart-like containers shipping necessities up to Cloudsdale. Thankfully, only a strip in the center of the staircase was stationary. There was a conveyor on either side of the staircase built specifically for pony transport. Warden just assumed that the staircase portion of the highway was for masochists. This isn't nearly as fun as I had hoped, Kuno admitted, sitting down on the conveyor belt and watching the clouds approaching. You mean you don't want to watch me sweat? Warden asked bluntly. I like watching you sweat, Kuno said with a slow smile, leaning in to nibble at the base of his ears and then cooing softly. I like licking it clean, too. Warren gave a faint shiver, his wings rustling. So, I'll walk then? He offered with a faint grin. Maybe on the way down, Kuno suggested, humming thoughtfully. We could get Swarm her own private compartment.
My own whole compartment?
Swarm asked, bouncing lightly in place. Warren automatically reached a hoof out to grasp his daughter's shoulder. No bouncing, you'll fall off. Swarm huffed and pursed her lips.
Never allowed to have any fun.
Fun does not involve bodily harm, Warren cautioned. You're so cute when you're serious, Kuno said with a grin, licking Warren's ear. You should be serious more often with me. Then you hit me, Warren complained. Oh, grow up, foal, Kuno said, covering him with her wing. After 15 long minutes of sitting on their butts, the conveyor belt ended and they could all step off onto the clouds of Cloudsdale. Swarm paused at the very edge of the platform, placing a hoof down against the cloud, testing it. Both Warden and Kuno held one of her wings each. A faint hum left the little hybrid, and then she bounded forwards, rolling about in the cloud happily.
It's so soft!
Warren just shook his head, and Kuno giggled. Another 10 minutes of walking brought them to the Wonderbolts' personal training ground. A huge structure made entirely of clouds dominated one end of Cloudsdale. It was oblong in shape, like a bread roll with a flat structure sticking out from the front of it that housed the Wonderbolts themselves. Warren knew already that the structure was almost entirely hollow. The entirety of the inside of the cylindrical shape was devoted to a wind tunnel, the personal training room of the Wonderbolts. At one end of the wind tunnel was a giant fan, propelled by magic and spinning too slowly to cause much harm, but powerful enough to cause a wind that had strength enough to send the unprepared tumbling right out of the tunnel and into the cloud bank behind.
Is this where your mommy and daddy live, Daddy?
Swarm asked amazed. Where they work, Warren said, rubbing a hoof against his ear nervously. You sure about the collar, hun? Kuno gave a nod. I'm certain. Warren took a deep breath and then gave a long, shaky exhalation. Well, sure we can't just go and drink some alcohol and forget about this whole business? Kuno gave a low growl and then pushed him with her hoofs.
No. Now you walk in there and face your parents like a good little whipped foal.
Warren whined faintly, his ears playing back. Fine, but you're paying me back for this. Warren gave a wry grin at that.
If you're a good boy, I'll let you wear the collar tonight.
That's more of a punishment, Warren pointed out, his cheeks flushing faintly.
Okay, then. Go in there or I'll put the collar on you tonight,
Kuno said with a sweet smile. Fine, Warren huffed, shaking towards the door. But when this goes south, I get to say, I told you so.